About 65 million years ago, some plants evolved to develop fruits as a means of protecting their seeds. The seed sits in the center of the fruit, surrounded by a layer of tissue called the pericarp. As well as protecting the seed, the juicy pericarp also attracts animals, which eat and then disperse the seed. The structure of the fruit has greatly facilitated plant reproduction. Later, mankind discovered that some fruits were edible. Edible fruits were labelled culinary fruits. The list of culinary fruits has grown longer as more wild fruits have been domesticated and cultivated by people. This is a mutually beneficial cooperation. This was also a complete revolution in the plant world. China, with its multiple climate zones and complex terrain, is a paradise for fruit. It is also one of the world's most important centres for fruit trees. About 700 kinds of fruit tree originated here, accounting for half of all species worldwide. Citrus fruits are unique among them. The list of citrus fruit species runs long, and many varieties of them originated in China. As the most in-demand fruit in the world, the production of citrus fruit dominates the global agricultural trade. The citrus family is huge. These fruit may vary in size and appearance, but they're all members of the same family. How did this fruit family grow to have so many different varieties? The citrus family evolved from 3 primary ancestral species. The first was citrons, which are thick-skinned and taste sour. The second was mandarins, blue-skinned, fleshy and juicy. The third one was pomelos, which are larger in size and have a paler flesh colour. Almost all citrus fruit have a rare genetic combination of being sexually compatible. This is an extremely rare trait among plants and allows their genes to mix, producing an impressive number of hybrid offspring. Early on, mandarins and pomelos produced oranges, then small flowered pepitas and citrons gave birth to Mexican limes and rough lemons. Later, sour oranges and citrons combined to produce lemons, and sour oranges and pomelos mixed to produce grapefruits. The citrus family is likely to grow even larger thanks to its impressive commonality. To better understand their secrets of reproduction, scientists are studying citrus fruit at the cellular level. These green and white solutions are taken from 2 different types of citrus fruits. Magnified 40 times under an optical microscope, you can see 2 types of cells. When their cell walls are removed, these cells gradually fuse into one in under 60 seconds. Such amazing compatibility gives members of the citrus family full freedom to crossbreed and produce hybrids. The cell fusion we saw just now could easily be cultivated into a new type of citrus fruit, loved by the world. Mankind has sped up the emergence of new hybrids through selective breeding, but in the wild, the production of a hybrid is still largely a random process. In 1820, a random genetic mutation marked the birth of a unique member of the citrus family. After exhausting most of its energy, this tree is in full bloom. Clusters of white flowers hang from its branches. Most plants can reproduce through successful fertilization of the flower and the subsequent growth of seeds, but this tree is somehow different. Despite all the efforts of its flowers, the fruit it produces are seedless. They are called navel oranges. Unable to reproduce by making seeds, it seems that the navel orange is doomed to a lonely future. Before navel oranges appeared, people were inspired by natural grafting and developed a surgical technique. This technique can fuse the tissue of two different trees so they can continue to grow together and parent new plants. In 1870, people succeeded in helping the seedless navel orange reproduce through grafting. People can now gorge on this delicious fruit year-round, thanks to the grafting technique, which has also transformed the navel orange's fate. People's love of this fruit has saved it from disappearing off the face of the planet. Citrus fruits have long been celebrated by Chinese people as metaphors of virtue. Qu Yuan wrote in praise of the orange tree more than 2,000 years ago. The poet praised the tree as the most wonderful plant on earth, an embodiment of loyalty and integrity. In times past, the orange tree was worshipped as a spiritual symbol. The Beledi citron travelled to Israel in the West, and Jewish people presented it as an offering to God. Citrus trees were introduced to Portugal in 1471 and cultivated around the Mediterranean region. Louis XIV, the King of France, loved the smell of orange trees and had many planted around the Palace of Versailles. During the Age of Discovery, scurvy claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of sailors, but not a single sailor fell victim to this disease during the 3 voyages led by Captain Cook. The captain's secret weapon against disease was a member of the citrus family, the lime. Later scientific studies proved that it was vitamin C in limes that kept the disease at bay. The discovery of vitamin C in limes marks an important step towards modern nutritional science. The citrus fruits, with their varied appearance and colours, have captured people's hearts, nourished people's health, and added a finishing touch to many dishes. With mankind as their caretaker, this fruit family has expanded and become one of the most popular types of fruit worldwide. The region traversed by the Yangtze River is one of the greenest areas in China. Deep in the mountains, there is a place called the Delau Ridge. This is the home of many ancient and rare wild plants, and a place where new species are constantly being discovered. Botanist Huang Hongwen is trying to find a particular kind of wild fruit. This fruit hides deep in the forest at an altitude of 1,700 meters. More than a century ago, the plant collector E.H. Wilson was hired by a British plant nursery to hunt for the same fruit. Huang Hongwen is following the same path that E.H. Wilson trod on his expedition all those years ago. Wilson visited China 4 times in his life. He spent nearly 12 years in China altogether and collected more than 65,000 plant specimens. He also discovered many new species and introduced more than 1,500 ornamental and economic plant species native to China to Europe and the USA. Poisonous insects, snakes, and dangerous beasts lurk in the forest. E.H. Wilson was putting his life on the line when he entered these unknown mountains, just so he could collect some new species of plant and introduce them elsewhere. The domestication and cultivation of important plants has often contributed to economic and social development, or even changed the course of history. The biggest contribution a botanist can make is to add another useful plant to the list. E.H. Wilson was probably driven by such a desire when he repeatedly made the journey upstream through the 3 gorges. He explored an area that few people had ever attempted to access before.
He must have come through here. The river was different back then, much narrower, much shallower, and less calm than it is now. After the 3 Gorges Dam was built, the water level rose significantly. The ship you were sailing on could run onto the rocks anywhere, and deadly shipwrecks often occurred. It was a gamble transporting things in those days, or traveling by ship.
Wilson survived the trip and caught sight of a wild fruit growing in the forest. It was known as Yangtao in southern China, Guozhou in the north. Today, it is commonly known as the kiwi fruit. The long, thin stems of woody vines need to use other plants for support as they grow upwards. For them, life in the dense forest is never easy. The kiwi fruit is a typical woody vine. After it takes root, orders are sent to all the new stems. Climb, the higher the better. A vine can only get nearer the sky by using taller and stronger plants as stepping stones and getting as much light as possible. Leaves grow from the stems and start producing energy for the mother plant to feed on. The stems of the kiwi fruit can climb through an area as big as a football pitch, trying to locate the tallest tree to enable them to climb even higher. These delicate-looking stems can climb their way through a whole forest. Life in the forest is tough, so the pollination of kiwi fruit flowers relies on a little bit of luck. This kiwi fruit has arranged a meeting with potential pollinators and is waiting for their arrival. The flowers have been slowly stretching themselves open since dawn. They'll need to work harder for a few more hours before they're fully open. After the stamens have been dried by the heat of the sun, a bee appears. The kiwi fruit is a dioecious plant. The male flowers only produce stamens when pollen grains are produced. The female flowers have both stigmas and stamens, but their stamens are only for decoration and do not produce functional pollen. Fertilization can only occur when a bee transports pollen grains from the male stamens to the female stigmas. More than a century ago, when E.H. Wilson first brought the kiwi fruit out of the mountains and down to Yichang Port, he had no idea how this fruit reproduced. Although he shipped kiwi fruit seeds to both the UK and the USA, the plants that grew from these seeds turned out to be all male and couldn't bear fruit. The first attempt to introduce the fruit to the wider world ended in failure. But it was in Yichang port that the fate of the kiwi fruit took a dramatic turn. Wilson introduced this fruit to a female teacher by the name of Isabel Fraser from New Zealand.
That was where the Church of Scotland stood, which was where Isabel Fraser was living. When E.H. Wilson returned from his expedition, he shared the kiwi fruit he had found with the Europeans living in this neighborhood by way of a celebration feast.
Isabel didn't just taste this delicious fruit, she also brought its seeds back with her to New Zealand. The wild fruit that grew deep in the mountains of China was given another chance to expand its territory. Now that its seeds had travelled to the southern hemisphere, would they suffer the same fate as those that were brought to the UK and USA? In 1904, Isabel gave a handful of kiwi fruit seeds to a local farmer, Alexander Allison, who had an interest in rare plants. Fortunately, New Zealand turned out to be an ideal home for the kiwi fruit. The winter here was mild, cold snaps in spring were rare, and the soil was loose and aerated, providing the perfect environment for the fruit to thrive. In 1910, the kiwi fruit, then known as the Chinese gooseberry, was first recorded as bearing fruit in the local orchards. It was already the 6th year since its arrival. For the first time, the kiwi fruit flowered and bore fruit outside its native China and started a new life in the southern hemisphere. The seeds given away by Isabel grew into 1 male plant and 2 female plants. This time, luck was on the side of New Zealand. At first, the fruit was only known to botany enthusiasts, but after continuous domestication and selective breeding, the fruit developed a rich, sweet and sour flavour. People tend to choose fruits that have an enjoyable flavour. This preference is not only embedded in our genes, but also influenced by our local environment and eating habits. People living in the same area often share the same tastes. The flavour of kiwi fruit varies from one species to another. How do we match the right flavour to the right group of people? A simple test will tell us. Scientists have recruited a group of customers exhibiting different taste preferences who are new to the local area. The fruit samples used in the test are carefully chosen. To ensure the results are not biased, they label each kiwi fruit with a random 3-digit number and distribute them in a random order. The different coloured light makes differences in colour hard to perceive. All the fruit samples are given out in the same manner. All these measures are taken to ensure that people make honest judgments based solely on the fruit's flavour. The kiwi fruit became immensely popular among New Zealanders, but back then its fruits were very soft, spoiled easily and could not be transported over long distances. If the kiwi fruit wanted to reach other parts of the world from New Zealand, they would need to be improved. What other adventures were in store for this fruit?
This is Avondale, a suburb of Auckland. Over 100 years ago, this is where Hayward Wright had his nursery. We can see a sign, Hayward Wright Lane. This is a new street on the site of where Hayward's nursery was somewhere in this direction. They are all new houses, but some of the trees are probably those that Hayward Wright planted 50 to 100 years ago.
Hayward Wright selected and propagated a species of kiwi fruit vine that produced large flavoursome fruits which were able to be kept for a long time without spoiling. These were the best of the 40 vines that grew in his nursery in 1928. The species was later named the Hayward.
It is the very best kiwi fruit, and it is the success of this cultivar which led to the success of the New Zealand industry.
The kiwi fruit had stumbled upon another life-changing event jointly created by nature and mankind. They were cultivated to reach their full potential, and new species were developed to travel long distances to feed the global market. This sparked New Zealanders' enthusiasm for the fruit, and it began to be produced on an industrial scale. April is the season for kiwi fruit harvest in New Zealand. Farmers have established agricultural organisations to optimise management. Seed selection, orchard planning and transportation were all scientifically monitored. When the weight, hardness, colour, dry matter and sweetness of the fruits have been closely examined, they are ready for picking. China, where the kiwi fruit originated, has become its biggest export market. Back in 1904, the kiwi fruit was still a wild fruit. In 1910, it started a new life in New Zealand and became known as the Chinese gooseberry. By 1928, it was a commonly grown fruit in New Zealand. In 1952, it was first exported from its new home and renamed the kiwi fruit after the national symbol of New Zealand, the kiwi bird. Now, it is sold in 59 countries worldwide as an iconic fruit of New Zealand. A whole industry has been built upon the discovery and domestication of a fruit. In a sense, the kiwi fruit has transformed the history of a country. The apple is one of the most readily available yet most extraordinary fruits. It is crowned as the king of fruit in many regions, with more than 7,500 cultivars. Most of the apples eaten in China today are modern cultivars, which were introduced to China less than 150 years ago. In ancient times, people would eat this delicious fruit as soon as they spotted one. Sweetness often implies high calorie content and abundant energy. Sweetness signals immediate relief from hunger. Sugar cravings have been gradually embedded in our genes during mankind's long evolution. Even now, sugar can still effectively turn a bad mood around. Big and red, sweet and crispy. These attractive qualities have been maintained in this cultivar. The red Fuji apple was developed in Japan to satisfy people's cravings for sugary food. This cultivar is the most popular apple variety in China, the leading producer of apples worldwide, accounting for 70% of all apples cultivated in the country. But the apple is faced with a shrinking gene pool as it has been propagated solely according to people's tastes. The reduction of varietal diversity is not a good thing for most species. So then, what is the best way to neutralize this risk? Deep in the Tian Shan mountain range, wild apple trees are scattered across the Eurasian hinterland, forming an important gene pool for the species. For millions of years, wild apple trees have thrived on this piece of land. During the last ice age, this place was their final refuge from the cold. The king apple tree stands above the others in the forest. This tree, over 600 years old, has witnessed the rise and fall of both the Ming and Qing dynasties and is the oldest of all the apple trees in the forest. This tree has provided accommodation for animals and fungi for centuries. Its tenants have drilled holes and cut grooves all over its body, but the tree is not harmed, as they have learned to coexist in peace after years of adaptation. In a good year, this grandmother tree can still produce more than 300 kilograms of apples. You will not find any two leaves in this world that are identical, and this is even more true for apple trees. Every individual apple seed contains a new and different genome and grows into a unique plant. Trees in this forest display a huge variety of characteristics. Such astonishing diversity is essential for the survival of the species. The apple's genetic code has hitherto been hidden away in this forest, but now these wild apple trees are facing an unprecedented challenge. Their enemies are now in hiding. The young of this insect are only 15 to 22 millimeters long. These larvae tunnel under the bark of the apple branches using their well-developed mouthparts, which damages the tree's ability to transport nutrients. Infested trees can wither and die due to their supply of nutrients being cut off.
This is a tunnel the larvae have left behind. You see, the branches are all hollowed out. We Kazakhs call the apple trees ironwood, as they are famous for their hardness. But the larvae can still tunnel through. You can dig them out of branches, but you can do nothing when they reach the heartwood. For a tree, the heartwood is like the heart of a man.
Back in 1993, unexamined apple tree branches from outside Xinjiang were grafted with local apple trees, bringing flat-headed apple tree borers with them. These savages shattered the well-balanced ecosystem that had been established in the forest. Caught off guard, the wild apple trees were defenseless against these invaders who quickly reproduce and colonize most of the forest. On its high vantage point, the king apple tree managed to escape the insect. But her clansmen at the foot of the mountains were less lucky. An alarming number of wild apple trees are dying, and now the whole forest is under threat. This gene pool that nature has bestowed on us has been contaminated due to human carelessness and is in grave danger. Fortunately, Chinese scientists have realized the seriousness of the situation and are trying to save the forest from this relentless insect. Botanists visit the forest almost every year to collect samples and assess the well-being of the apple trees. Researchers have developed red-fleshed apples and other kinds of hybrids by grafting the wild apple trees with other varieties to increase the size of the apple's gene pool. Although mankind is here to help, the apple will still need to grow stronger if it is to survive on this planet. Life is always full of challenges for all species. This forest is a reminder to people of the mistakes they have made and how they are struggling to make things right again. It also marks the beginning of building a more harmonious world. This is the Tibetan Plateau, also known as the roof of the world. A kind of fruit that Chinese people are familiar with originated right here. When the Yalung Tsangpo first began traversing this cold region, its watery body became a cradle of life. Hundreds of millennia ago, the receding glaciers left accumulations of sediment that appear as ridges of low hills. One species of plant thrived here in groups. The smooth stone peach, or nectarine, an ancestor of the cultivated peach. Against the backdrop of these magnificent mountains and the roaring crystal-clear river, the vigorous smooth stone peach trees decorate the land with their graceful and lively presence. The towering plateau is cold and oxygen deficient, so the smooth stone peach has learned to keep its energy consumption at the lowest levels possible, as a way to save up enough energy to enable it to flower at the earliest opportunity. The pollen grains of the smooth stone peach tree have a simple structure. You can see horizontal lines on the grains when they are magnified 100 times under an optical microscope. These lines are the evidence of their primitiveness. The smooth stone peach must disperse as much pollen as possible to increase its chances of fertilization during the fleeting flowering season. Animal pollinators are rare in this cold, inhospitable place, and the smooth stone peach can only open its flowers and wait for the wind. Hopefully, a strong breeze will carry the pollen grains to their designated destination to be fertilized. Botanists visit this smooth stone peach specimen, number 138, when it flowers each year.
This is the biggest tree in this area. Years ago, we were staying beside the Yushu Primary School, and a group of children led us to this tree and climbed inside this tree hole. They told us that this tree was huge and produced delicious peaches, so we took a special interest in this tree and studied it. This tree hole is large enough to accommodate 3 or 4 kids. It's stronger than you can ever imagine.
Botanists have proved that the smooth stone peach was the ancestor of the cultivated peach by applying genome sequencing to cells extracted from this tree.
Every time I look at this tree, my heart is filled with admiration and awe.
In Tibet, the local people revere the smooth stone peach as a holy species of tree. They never prune or disturb the trees, giving the trees full freedom to grow on this land. The locals respect the trees as a life form that existed here long before their arrival.
All species must learn to blend in with their surroundings if they are to survive. Different species are interdependent and live as a whole. No one plant can survive without the others.
The smooth stone peach was growing here long before this castle was built over 1,000 years ago. These trees have watched over life and death, survived horrible wars, and witnessed revolutions. Dynasties rose and fell, but the trees have always stood here, keeping people company. As time went by, people began to favor peach trees that bore more delicious fruit than the others. This variety was selected and introduced to other parts of China. The species was domesticated and propagated, and their fruits became juicier and fleshier. The surface of their stones lost its smoothness and became ridged. These are stones of the smooth stone peach, and these are from the common peach. The peach stones have borne witness to peach's domestication. The peach is a very resilient plant and can readily adapt to different environments after millions of years of evolution. Chinese people have taken a keen interest in this plant since ancient times and associate it with a variety of auspicious qualities. Its prized fruit contains more than 2,000 nutrients that can be easily digested by humans. As a common plant in China, the peach has become a symbol for the Chinese people, who celebrate it and admire it with unparalleled enthusiasm. As a bridge connecting mankind with nature, this plant has awed people with its great resilience and natural beauty. it has left its eternal mark on the world of literature and art. This is another home for plants. Here, their seeds sleep peacefully. People built this haven for seeds because of concerns over sustainable development in the 1980s. This place is the Noah's Ark of our age. It can help prevent species from going extinct and protect against hazards such as wars, floods, fires and plagues. As of now, 435,000 seeds of numerous valuable species are stored here in a big freezer at a temperature of minus 18 degrees Celsius. Fruit trees are being stored here in a new way. Scientists are sealing the dormant buds of apple trees in bags. These buds hide inside the branches waiting for spring to arrive, and have the power to grow when they are allowed to do so. These dormant buds are put into liquid nitrogen tanks at a temperature of minus 196 degrees Celsius, where they sustain themselves with the minimum energy necessary for survival. This safe house for plants is a treasure room for mankind. People have discovered and domesticated about 700 species of fruit tree, and nearly half of them can be found in China. These fruit trees have nourished mankind and enriched our experience of flavour. More and more new species will be discovered and cultivated as humans continue to explore the plant world to find even more delicious fruits. The bond between mankind and fruit trees will continue to mutually influence and mould both our futures.